Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Thursday. It's May 19th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And as you can see here, for the most part, I mean, we're looking at the daily chart here with the envelope bands, but you can see this is kind of a neutral day. We closed a good bit off the lows, but we also closed a good bit off the highs. But this is a very kind of neutral type bar here, so it's just a big range today is what we had. So you can see that on the daily chart, and when we flip over to the intraday chart, you'll see that as well. So let's flip over that. It is Thursday, so this will be wrap up our week. No chart lessons on Fridays. Just a reminder to the new people that might be looking for one on Fridays. But anyway, let's flip over to the 2000 tick chart and go through the trades. Okay, here is a look at the 2000 tick intraday chart, and you can see it's just a range day. And really, we spent most of the day kind of bouncing around this midline here, trying to go higher. Prices are they want to go higher, but they're just, every time we get up here, the selling comes in and they just hammer it back down. So, I mean, and you can see it's just hard to trade because you'll get this huge move up, and the next thing you know, you're rocketing down just as fast, and then you get a huge move up, and then we actually got two legs up this time, and then you get this huge move down, and it's just really hard to trade this stuff. And I keep hearing people say that some days I do so well, and some days I think I got this. The next day I do horrible, and well, some days are easier to trade than others. And you just have to understand that these are very difficult days to trade because there's no consistent bounce. I mean, if every time prices came to the blue, they turn up, it's a gimme kind of a range. And if every time prices hit the highs, they turn down, it's a gimme kind of range. But when you turn at different places and there's no consistency, really you just about you either have to wait till it gets here or wherever the lows are. You can see the lows kind of got around they really were around the opening. The yellow line was the opening price at 8:30, and that kind of set the lows for the day from that point on. So really we bounced between that and the upper part. And so, but there's no real good trades that set up off of that really. And so you almost had to trade either the small ranges in the middle or the trends. And a lot of these trends, they just reverse and go, and you don't even get a setup on them. So it's difficult trading. So if you're struggling, don't let it beat you up. The key is just to be patient, because you can see there's a lot of red or blue arrows in here. So you only need one or two of them. So just be patient, wait on the setup, and don't try taking every swing and every trade. And that's what happens to most inexperienced traders, and it's why they lose, is because they're looking for an entry on every single swing. Every swing, every bar. And I get people that send me that and says, I'm really concentrating on every bar. And you don't really want to concentrate on every bar, because you'll miss the forest for looking at the trees, so to speak. You got to see the forest or the big picture. And if you don't see the big picture, there's no way you can trade consistently, because you don't know what prices are doing. They're always headed somewhere. And if they're in one of these channels, they're going back and forth between the support and resistance until it gives. And then we get one working up, and it's doing the same thing until it gives. Then we got one working down, working up. This is just a completion of this one. We get the break, move to a new low, and then we start working higher again. And then we start working lower again. And prices just bounce around in these channels within this range, or these side, or even the congestion small ranges within. So just keep that in mind. But let's zoom in. We'll go through the trades. There's a few of them here, so I'm going to move through them pretty quickly. I don't like these 30 and 40-minute chart lessons, because it gets too drawn out and takes up too much of my time, and it's probably hard to keep people's attention that long. So if there's something worth discussing, I'll spend a few minutes on it, but otherwise I'm going to zip through the trades and just explain what each trade is and move on. So, but anyway, early on we got this yellow channel coming down, and we get this break, but you got to pay attention to this channel until it ends, and then we may try to get a retest of lows. There's a close outside here, but it's not very convincing. So there's a good chance we're going to come back. And prices did try to come back, but they couldn't. So, but that's what we're looking for here. So when this one works up, and you've already got a little resistance over here, and this is the midline of the big channel. So keep that in mind. And notice we made that overshoot, and we tested it once, we tested it twice. So you got a triple test there, right at the midline, and you got a failed second entry long as well there. And look how far away we are from the EMA. So prices are very likely to come back. Now I know somebody's going to say, well, what about that trend line right there? Well, that's why I made this green. If this trend line hadn't been there, I'd make this red. But I'm still pretty confident prices would at least come back to that EMA, to the EMA right there. They've been away since way down here at 6 o'clock, and here it is after 7, and we haven't made a retest of this low, so prices are going to try to retest that low. But anyway, we drop on down. You try to go higher once, twice. And let me show you this here. Of course, you don't have this trend line yet, but notice how that, notice there is a 1 tick higher there, but look how that all looks like one leg. So just because the count says this is a second entry doesn't mean it's necessarily a second entry. I've explained this before, but maybe I don't explain it enough. Maybe people aren't listening. I don't know. But look how that looks like one leg down. So there's your first entry and your second entry as far as visually. And we're more interested in visual than the actual counts, because you'll get these little, that 1 tick is meaningless right there. You can tell that's all one move down. And then you try to go higher once, you try to go higher twice, and it fails when it breaks lower right there. Technically, it failed right there when it went lower right there, but that still all looks like one move back up, so I treated that as the failure. That you had 2 real attempts to go higher right there. And it's an easy scalp. You don't get much more out of it and bounces. Well, now you draw your trend line, and be careful because we could be going higher. And that's what's happening here. And notice there is a failed second entry short there, but look how sideways that is. Don't try to trade that. Yeah, it works, but sometimes it won't, and you don't want to risk that. Just wait, and notice a few minutes later you make a new high, and you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry right off the EMA, right off a little double bottom right there. Nice bullish bar, and it actually comes back and gives you a higher low right there on a triple test now. I like going long there on the higher low. It should have taken off there, because it didn't. I wouldn't trust anything else here. Just if you didn't enter on one of these two, there's no other entry there. Just wait. And it does end up taking off. And we're just working higher. I don't see any entries in here until finally you get a first entry and then a second entry. And you can clearly see a couple of legs down there. It's a little bit sideways, but it's 2 legs down there. You don't have that little no body or small body doji type bar. So that's clearly 2 legs back to the midline, the EMA. And you'd expect prices to make a new high. And if they're going to the upper side of the channel, it's way up here. And then off they go. And we actually get an overshoot up here. So that means we're probably at least coming back to here, but we may reverse and not even get a retest of the high here. And then notice what happens. You're running down, and you try to go higher once, turn down, and then you try to go higher twice. It fails. So that's a failed second entry long right there. And it's also a first entry, second entry short. There's a lower high here, but it's right by that time you got a little double bottom here, and it's a little congested looking. You could probably still argue for that one. I'll make it green. I think it's a little aggressive. If you didn't enter here, I probably wouldn't enter that one. And of course it just takes off there. And there's no other entries down here. You're too far away from the EMA. And notice you make a new low and you get a first entry, second entry. There's a second entry right there. Unfortunately, that bar is not good enough. It didn't go very far, but it would have been easy. It would have been an easy scalp, but it just didn't go very far. And you actually get a first entry, second entry long, but that just looks like sideways congestion. I didn't draw But hopefully you can see that. That's just sideways stuff. And so you just can't really trade that. It's too risky. You can't go long right into the EMA and that resistance right there because most of the time it won't work. Sure, at some point it'll push through, but it's hard to judge that. So anyway, we run straight up here, come outside, you get a first entry, and then it pulls back and you get a second entry here. I marked this one green because really you got to enter on a inside bar. It's very bullish though, and it is a second entry. If you did take it, you could also kind of treat that as a high or low, but again, it's an inside bar and they're unreliable, but that does confirm this trend line here too. So I tend to like that entry, just for the special reasons I just talked about. It confirms the trend line. It's a second entry. We're looking for a retest of the high. They probably got a lot of shorts built up here, so if it breaks higher, it's probably going to run stops. And you can see by that big bullish bar that, yeah, they ran the stops there. So I tend to like that one. It's definitely aggressive. It's definitely a little more advanced. So, but even if you enter there, this is the swing low, so your safety stop has to go one tick below the big bar here. And from here to there, I mean, it looks like a big bar, but you're really entering here. So from there to there, you know, it's still 6 points, 7 points or so. So it's still a pretty big bar, but in this volatility, you're going to have a lot of big bars. And if you just either have to decide if you want to risk it or not. So, but this thing runs straight up. Another nice move, and then all of a sudden we're chopping down again. And notice your new high, and you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry. And so if it breaks lower there, you got a failed second entry. I like that one. After that, it just kind of goes sideways, so you can't do anything else with that, even though it drops on down and bounces right off that trend line. But this channel, it is a little bit of an overshoot, and you are a little bit away from the EMA, but it's just it's not even a first entry. It's like a first, second, third, like a fourth entry, and you just can't risk that. You got to wait for, you need some kind of show of bullishness and then a setup. And then there's your little show of bullishness, and you come back and you get a higher low right there. It wasn't quite back to the trend line, so I was a little leery of it. I said, you know, wait and see if you get a higher low, and guess what, you get one, but it's this big red bar. Now if you notice, it looks a lot like this. It's kind of a repeat pattern of that. So if you notice that, maybe you take that trade right there. But it's definitely a more advanced trade. And again, your stop would have to go on the red bar, and you'd go long one tick above the green inside bar. It's a really bullish bar, and it is right off the key entry point. And it's clearly two legs back there. So I just don't think you want to enter on that. I mean, if you did enter on that second entry, it works. But a lot of times you'll get stopped out on that only to see it go higher. So I just don't think it's worth taking. And then there's actually a failure right here, but that just looks, it's really congested. There's probably enough room to scalp out. It's another one. I didn't mark it, but you could argue for it to be green. There's always going to be a few of these in there that I just don't mark because there's just so many trades, and you know, why risk these green ones? But this is just how hard a trading day it is. I mean, so far since 8:40, there's been a bunch of trades, but every one of them have been high risk, aggressive type trades, and you don't get another good trade really until 9:30. And then this is a more advanced trade that most traders don't need to be taking, new traders, because it's a failure type trade, and you need to really be a good chart reader to take these, and you have to understand where they're valid and where they're not. But you look for them at reversal places, and look at all that resistance across there. And we broke out. We tried to go higher once. You get a second entry. You try to go higher twice. And somebody will probably ask me, well, why didn't you go long there on that second entry? Well, you just broke out above all that resistance right there. It's probably going to fail. And look how congested it looks. You got that one bar, one beside it. Here's another one, nobody. This one, nobody. It's just really risky there. So just wait and see if you get a trap. And if you don't, then you miss the trade. But it's dangerous going long right there. And you can see the trend line. And so you'd be going long right into the trend line. And it was obviously valid because look how it closed. Or rather, the open was below it. And even though it traded above it, it doesn't close outside it. And then so when it breaks lower, there's your failure. Boom. And that's a move of the day right there. If you just waited on that one trade, you may not have got a runner here. It would depend on where you entered, I guess. But there's a possibility you don't get a runner on that one. But if you do, look at it go. And then you get another 2 legs back here, but we make a lower high. It's just sideways stuff. And then we get the break here. I don't see there's no reason to go long yet. And there is a lower high here, but we've moved. I mean, that's a long move there to consider that a lower high. So that's just, and you're going short right at the low of that move. I just don't like that one. I think we see a few more of those as a repeat pattern later on. So you might trade them. And I actually missed a trend line here. There's a trend line working down here. And you get a close outside, a new low, and it still continues to try to go low and eventually fails. And this is just support here. There's a little range going on here. This one's really tempting. It is a second entry on a failed breakout, but generally you want to wait on a higher low when you get a new swing low like that. Just like right here, and you see you get a higher low right there, but it's right into resistance, and what happens? It fails. You might have still got out of that trade, but it's not worth risking. And then finally you get another new low, and finally you make a higher low here. I marked this one green because it's an engulfing bar, and you see how it ended up closing, very neutral. But if you did trade this one on the engulfing bar, you were okay. And you could have still gone long there, but that bar is too neutral to use for a signal bar. So if you didn't enter on the engulfing bar, you just can't enter there. So, but it takes off. Can't enter way up here, and then we get a break. We try to make a new high and can't. There's no shorts there either. I don't see any. You might say, hey, there's a first entry, second entry, but that doesn't set up like a reversal. So you'd need a lower high with a good signal bar, and then it's just congestion. And of course, it bounces down here again. And this time you get a higher low with a good signal bar. I like going long there. Runs back up right to the same resistance that we've been meeting across there, and turns down, but no setup. And notice this time we make a little higher low, and then another higher low, and we turn down there again. I don't see any reason to be entering in these because you would still expect prices to try to go here. So I would say you might trade that as a lower high, but I think with it being right in the middle, you want to skip the lower high. So, and it is a little congested too. But suddenly it runs on up. Now you got a 1, 2, 3 triple test. That's really a second entry short as well. So I like that one. The lower high is the better one. You got that one. Both of them are good trades. You don't get any real runners out of them. And then suddenly you find support at the midline and take off again. But I don't see any reason to go long right here. There is a breakout pullback long right here, but that's very risky. And you can see it actually went higher and came back. And you just don't really get a setup on that one. It's unfortunate. And we run all the way to the highs. You can't go short there. It's too congested. But it comes back and makes a lower high. But again, you don't get a break lower and you get an inside bar. And it's still just kind of chopping along. And there is one more move up right there. So that's somewhat of a lower high. Technically, you could call that a second entry. I didn't mark that trade. But if you saw that as a second entry, maybe you take that trade. I don't know. You could probably argue for it to be green. I was hoping we'd get a reversal, and we don't. It just drops down. And you do get an overshoot here, and you get a reversal right here. Notice the new low, first entry, second entry. So that's going to trap people. And you can see how that rockets up real fast. and then just runs out of steam. That's a sure sign of a trap right there. Um, and it just keeps chopping higher. I don't see anything else in here until you find, if you got a good signal bar there, you might have gone short, especially if you had room back to the trend line and the EMA, but you don't, and it's not a good signal bar, and it just drops. And then notice here you get two legs back, and there's a little two-legged move in the middle as well. So that's, on a bigger picture, that's a second entry short at the key entry point, at the EMA, when you just made a big bearish leg down. I didn't mark it. It's a little more advanced, but if you see that, you could take that trade. But the better one's when it comes back here and tries to go higher again and gives you that bearish bar. As long as you got room to get out, you probably take that trade. That's the better move, and you can see it just takes off. And you would get a runner on this one. Boom, just runs down. You got to pay attention here. Notice it didn't get that back down to the trend channel line. It came up short. You get a first entry, second entry right at the key entry point. But because it didn't get back here, there's a good chance you get a break of this trend line. And it does. This trade would have still worked. So you may take that because that's a pretty strong move down. And you got plenty of room to get out. So you may get a good scalp there. It's just a little risky. And of course it does bounce and you get the break. And again, you got a new swing low. It's lower than that one. So you get a first entry, second entry. So now you've got two legs on the bigger picture and a second entry in that leg. And plenty of room back to the EMA. I like taking that trade. And then, of course, you get a close outside that green trend line, run to a new high. And then there's that lower high again. Normally, I would say that's moved a long way, but we've seen several of those today. There's one. Where was the other one? There's one. There's several of them. There's some more in here, too. We've seen that a good bit today. So because it's kind of a repeat pattern, maybe take it. So drops on down, makes a new low off this yellow channel, and then we bounce. There is a reversal here. I don't like the way it sets up. It's away from the EMA. I mean, it's close, but it's just really a lot of sideways bars. It might trap some people. I mean, again, it's one you could argue to be green. If you're a seasoned, skilled chart reader who knows how to read the chart, maybe you take that. You move up, you get a break of the green channel, move to a new high, and then you're just chopping sideways. But notice you got a low there. You test it once, you test it twice, and that's also a second entry long. We're not looking for second entries in there, so don't get confused. But if you get a triple test and a high or low, and it turns out to be a second entry, pay attention to it. So there it is. This looks like a reversal, but again, we don't look for that here. And it didn't break higher there on the next bar anyway. So it would have worked, but you see what happens if it could have just gone a few ticks and did what it did here, and you just get burned. So, but it drops down and just out of nowhere it reverses. And look at that move. I mean, look how strong that was. And you get no retest, no nothing. It's just a quick move down that reverses and goes the other way. There's no way to trade that. So this is just a good example of what I'm telling you about how hard these days are. But we get that straight up, and then we just kind of drop down here. And then we're just kind of going sideways. It's just really hard to know what prices are doing there. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason to it. They drop straight. Of course, if you follow the price action, it's a failed break lower, which often leads to a huge move up. But I just don't think you can risk that on a day like this. We did bounce there earlier. So, but this trend channel is still in play. There's been that's the first close outside. I just think it's too risky to try to go long there. You need a higher low or something, and you just don't get it. Same thing coming down. You get a lower high here, but the signal bar is no good. Then you're just going sideways. But you do get a triple test off the, first you get a triple test off the highs with a nice bearish bar, go short there. And then notice you get a triple test off the lows with a nice signal bar. And you can see we're clearly turning down off the highs and turning up off the lows. That's an easy to trade range. trade the triple test, and then there's another one off the top, bearish. And then notice how we come up short these last two times. And then you get a break higher, but it just instantly reverses and comes back, and you just don't get a setup bar here to try to trade that as a failed breakout or anything. And you don't want to go long there. You might say there's a triple test here, but the signal bar is not very good. There's a high or low here, but it's right into this high, and you're just chopping higher. But notice you get a break, and then you get a first entry, second entry, so you get a break and two legs up right to the high of the range where we've been turning down. The problem is you made a new high there. It was higher than this one. So I'd wait on a lower high, but you still may take that trade. I like it. It's a second entry. It's two legs up. It's a failed break higher. But this is the better trade. And you think you're probably headed lower, but instead now you get another two legs up. So it's really tough trading. And it's tempting to go long on that high or low right there. And there is room back to that little double top. So it's a possibility, but there's your previous resistance, and it's just not smart. But you can see we pushed up there twice, so we've probably run the stops up to this double top. So it's another one. You may take that. And you can see once they broke it higher, they ran the stops. Look at it, boom. They got a lot of people short here, and they ran their stops right there. And then the buying dries up. You tried to go higher three times, and you get a small 9 ticks on a trap right there. It's probably going to run back to the EMA. That's an ideal trade. Too bad it didn't push on through, because it does come back and get any runners, and you don't really get a chance to enter short again on the big move. And then it just chops on down. There's a second entry short right here, but the signal bar's too bullish. And that takes you into 230. So it was really a tough day. It really was. But at the same time, there's a lot of red and blue trades here. So just sit tight. Don't press trades. Don't be so eager to enter, and wait on the sure things, not included reversals, because most of you don't. I would say there's probably only 1 out of every 10 traders, if that many, that should be looking at reversals. And everybody wants to trade them because they do make good moves, and you see a lot of them. But I get more emails and more questions about failures and why did a failure fail? Well, if a failure fails, it wasn't a failure. So your read was just incorrect. And there's not really any easier way to put it than that. And the problem is most people shouldn't be trading those, because you have to understand the context. A reversal needs to be happening where you're expecting a reversal, not just in the middle of some range or something. Because when you get in this choppy sideways stuff, forget about second entries, forget about failures. Trade the range rules, buy the support, sell the resistance. That's how you trade it. You don't trade second entries and failures and stuff in there. You just get chopped to pieces. So anyway, I'm not going to drag this out anymore. I'm going to wrap it up. Going to wrap up the week. No chart lesson tomorrow. So we'll be back Monday. I'm done for today. I'm done for this week. Hope you had a good trading day. Hope you have a good one tomorrow. I'll see you Monday. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.